What's up, guys? It is Dan from FightWave, and today I am bringing you guys a very different interview from my normal standard of interviews that I do over here on FightWave. If you know anything about me, normally we bring on fighters, but we rarely get to bring on the voices behind the UFC broadcast and the people behind the scenes and in front of the scenes who make the fight scene actually happen and make the fight show what it is. Today I'm privileged to be joined by somebody who, in my opinion, I feel like doesn't get talked about enough in terms of the broadcast and play-by-play. I feel like his voice, and especially in what he's done in his 10 years with the UFC thus far, and his 22 years in the industry so far, has been amazing. He's been a trailblazer for the UK, and I cannot wait to speak to him in this upcoming interview. I want to thank you first and foremost, Mr. John Gooden. John, thank you so much for your time. And my goodness, what a 10 years it has been since you started with the UFC in 2014 to now. It has been a story to remember. Talk to me first and foremost about how you're feeling reflecting on your 10 years with the UFC thus far, ahead of what's going to be, I think, a revolutionary card in Manchester come a week from now.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the kind introduction, and I'm grateful. Never got into this. I never got into MMA or got into the broadcasting side with the thought of the UFC. Even when I was training to fight, I found the sport too late to even think about a career in the UFC. I wanted to just see how I could go, how far I could go domestically. And then when things changed, I was just representing the sport, writing, whatever it took. And lo and behold, here we are, 10 years on. I've been holding a UFC microphone, been around the world, covered some of the best events. I'm really, really grateful and just privileged to have a voice in the sport.
Definitely. And when you talk about just, coming from humble beginnings, and for you, you talk about in several other interviews and even on your own YouTube, which I'll be linking in the description down below, just about how you started this sport with from humble beginnings, like you mentioned, as a fan of the sport and as a fan of combat sports as a greater whole, writing articles for whether MMA websites, and even starting out doing interviews on a dictaphone, which obviously is a ancient tech nowadays. But you talk about just getting into the sport with the best of intentions, and opportunities arising from genuine passion. And right now it feels like we've got arguably the best broadcast crew in all of sports, period, with the UFC. We've got some talented voices like yourself, John Anik and Brendan Fitzgerald, who obviously aren't former fighters, but the passion that you guys bring to the broadcast is unlike any other broadcaster who hasn't partaken in the sport that they cover. Talk to me a little bit about sharing the stage with those guys and all of the other amazing fighters that you get to cover with on the broadcast.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that John is. I'm glad that you noted him like that because I think he's maybe one of, if not the best broadcaster that we've ever had in combat sports. I just think he's silky smooth, despite not having like a lot of mat time and been, punching a face a bunch. It doesn't matter for John. He he's just very eloquent, got a clear passion for this job, super bright and darn good at what he does there. So I learn a lot and enjoy my conversations with John. There aren't that many people who have been through a UFC broadcast, and it is different. It really is different. I've done some other MMA shows on the come up, and just the amount of show elements, especially for a Brit. Like American broadcasting is packed full of commercials and a lot of promo material. Even the energy that is needed is pretty different to what we're used to here in the UK. But on the same side of the coin, I will say I've never really done any of that stuff. As I said before, I've been an MMA guy. This is what I enjoyed watching. This is what I've kind of cut my teeth in, and it's like sailing very choppy waters every single time. You never know how long a fight's going to go, and then there's all these scripts that we have to prepare for. Then they're off the table if the fight goes really fast. Then the next couple of fights go really slow. Then they get brought back in. It's it's really challenging. It's really good fun, and we get to share the booth with some of the greatest fighters we've ever seen in mixed martial arts. They are interesting characters as well. You've big personalities, so that a lot of skills come into keeping everyone happy, and even behind the scenes, what people that you guys don't meet and see very often. They've got some of the most creative, hardworking, and passionate MMA fans there too. So we really do have a great group of individuals and a collective team to help deliver every single week.
Definitely. And you talk about just the atmosphere of the UFC events being not like any other event you've necessarily covered. But one thing that I've really noticed as of recently is just, when you talk about the pressures that come with such a prestigious job, I feel like that doesn't get talked about enough. And I know for you guys in the commentary booth, obviously, with the new age of social media, people vocalizing a lot of their opinions and saying a lot of what they feel like about the commentary team, it's become a topic of interest as of late. And I would love to get your thoughts on just maybe some of the pressures that come with commentating, maybe the stuff that people don't recognize. You talk about kind of the fast pace or the limbos that come with being a commentator. What's that kind of been like for you, just kind of evolving with the job and seeing also the pressures that come with it? And even John Anik speaking about it on the Anik Florian show about a little bit of just the toxicity that comes with the job.
Yeah, well, John's profile is bigger than mine. I think that pay-per-view tag really brings a good few additional layers. Of course, the fans have been pretty kind to me, I think, because it's only recently that I've been getting more reps. You might have heard me 5, 6 times a year. So I think it's nice to have a different voice. I would say that, of course. There's something comfortable in familiarity. I think if we look at our own TV shows, you look at a TV schedule, you see a lot of the same hosts, presenters, commentators all the time because we get comfortable with their voice. Now, I've been around a few years. Dan Hardy and I used to do quite a bit of work together, and real ardent fans would come across us a bit. They got familiar with us. We were clearly in tune with one another. And that allowed me to like have a little bit of a softer introduction to the fan base. But again, I never really got into this for the fandom and any kind of notoriety. So I have struggled with a few of those elements. I'm a sensitive soul at heart. And so it's taken me a long time to realize how to deal with the criticism, but also how to balance someone literally turning around and saying, I think you're the best sports broadcaster in the world. I know I'm not. But I find it very difficult to take that seriously. So how should I take it seriously when someone says you're the worst thing I've ever heard on television? And every week you'll get both sides. As long as I'm employed by the UFC and they feel like I add value, I try and do as many different things for the UFC as well in like a producer role. Literally 10 minutes ago, I'm trying to sort out 3 different shoots here in Europe to get coverage of guys for fight nights and pay-per-views. So, I'm just here to serve mixed martial arts. Right now, the UFC are the guys cutting the paychecks as well. I hope that continues too. My deal is up at the end of the year. So yeah, I mean, you have to take it. It's part of the role. It does hurt sometimes because we put so much into this, the heart and soul. You sit there crafting all of your best lines and for all of the scripted parts, and then when the fights come on, you're trying to be as balanced as you can. You're trying to tell the story. You're trying to make it interesting. You're trying to educate. There's a lot that goes into it. My voice won't be for everyone. That actually is something that I struggle to deal with because I'd love to be universally liked. But if I can be respected, then I'll take that as a close second best.
Absolutely, and I have to say first and foremost, I think that off on the record, I think that you do a phenomenal job on the broadcast, and I want to make that
Oh, thank
abundantly
you very
clear. And
much. Thank
also,
you.
just in terms of like you mentioned, you hit the nail on the head. It feels like nowadays with just how much the ease of access of MMA media is now, it feels like everybody, whether it's a fan or a hobbyist, can get into the sport in some degree, pick up a camera and a microphone and broadcast their opinions on the sport. I feel like that ease of access also brings a level of scrutiny and criticism that we haven't seen before with combat sports coverage and with stuff like that. I want to get your thoughts on just the ease of access in mixed martial arts coverage. Now, you look at a lot of other organizations letting a lot of guys who are first time people or newcomers coming in, covering the events. It has its good and bad, a lot of kind of mixed opinions on it. I would love to get your thoughts on just the state of MMA media right now and also just how easy it's become to cover the sport.
Well, I think it's a positive that people want to get involved. We need as many voices in this sport as we can to cover the audience, to cover the range of ages that consume mixed martial arts content as well. And like there'll be young fighters that will I'm just not going to vibe with. I'm in my 40s now. I won't be watching the same shows, listening to the same music, have the same hobbies and interests. So we need We need young people coming through at the same time that can appeal to that kind of audience. I do feel like I do feel like your stripes need to be earned to be in certain positions in Media Road, truth be told. Like I've witnessed something recently where a guy was, who was the guy that was pretty disrespectful to Nate Diaz?
Yeah.
Right.
So
So he's taken a credential from someone else that would really value that position. Now, it's really interesting though. I was going backwards and forwards with a friend of mine that's someone who's in the media in another sport, and I very much respect him, bright guy. And he said, "You got it wrong, John. That guy brought more attention to that fight than any other kind of straight-laced combat sports journalist might have done." And I'm like, but I think you have to play the long game here. There's a lot of short-termism in combat sports at the moment. There's a lot of disruptors. I'm kind of all for it, but I think we've got to sail through these shores to see just how long it all sticks. There is a reason why certain things work. They are tried and tested. But most of all, we've got to respect the athletes. You know, without those men and women putting it on the line, then none of us have a job. And I just think it's a real shame, and it's a bit of a cheap shot for likes, etc. It's just not the way that I do things. But I am seeing more and more people coming to the fore in MMA media, and that's the one that I'm consuming most. And they're pretty ferocious towards fighters, other members of the media, commentary teams, etc. And apparently they're really popular. So maybe I got it wrong, but it's just not where I want to be swimming. And we'll see how long it lasts. So gimmicks aren't for me. I just think that they wear off.
absolutely. I feel like I definitely agree with the sentiment that you hold, and just like the long term effects of this have to be observed because it feels like in the short term, of course, it's all publicity is good publicity for them, but in the long term, it's kind of something that it could set a bad precedent for the coverage of mixed martial arts in the long
Yeah.
term. And it's very kind of concerning because you talk about the athletes, how much these fighters put on the line for us, and just more importantly, like when you talk about fighters who go in there and give it their all, and then you've got media members or fans of the sport who pick up that camera, kind of bad mouthing them. It sets a bad precedent not just for people who want to cover the sport that you have to do this to become kind of beloved by the fan base, but for the fans, setting a bad example with, especially, I want to get your thoughts on this, the situation with Arman Sarukian and the fan at UFC 300, that being obviously a topic of hot discussion recently. What are your thoughts on that, and just even the fan base, taking after the steps of these media members that are not media members, but these individuals that like to kind of badmouth the fighters or let this kind of behavior a little bit be enabled?
Yeah. So I haven't dived into that. I know what you're talking about. I saw it. You can't, we've all got to be held accountable for what we do. And we're especially well, no, everywhere. It doesn't matter that it's the UFC, but there's a lot of eyeballs there, so you can't go and do certain things. Like this may go over your head, but there was Eric Cantona was a guy. He once like two-footed challenged a fan that was giving him a bunch of shit one time, and it was just front page news all the way back then. So there's no difference here. And just as I was saying, because I've got to be balanced in like the athletes as well as maybe media members, excuse me, that are misbehaving. Like there are other people that are looking into our sport, big sponsors, more importantly, where they're trying to take us seriously. And if they see certain things, then they're just not going to touch it. I know that combat sports isn't for everyone. MMA certainly isn't for everyone. So I just think we have to be careful. I think he's been dealt. He's going to be doing an anti-bullying campaign, right? I mean, good. Like that, as long as he can still do his thing and he can put something out there positively. But yeah, at the same time, maybe that guy should get banned from. I don't know what was done or said. That's the thing. But if it was, I remember Matt Brown. We were in Brazil, and I think someone like tugged on his hoodie, or the guy that was stealing the cap. I mean, it's funny. Ban him. Like ban those people as well, because the fighters are trying to, that's their job, right? They're walking to work. They're working at that point. As soon as you come through the curtain. And it's not fair to them to do that. So they should be held accountable as well. So I don't know the other side of the story, but yeah, let's move forward. And I think you get a slap wrist for something like that. That's just how society is.
Definitely. And when you talk about something like, I feel like it should just be an unwritten rule that you shouldn't touch the athletes as they're doing their walkout. But then again, you'll have fight fans be fight fans. But onto, a better note, when you talk about the UK MMA scene right now, John, it feels like there's never been a better time to be a fan of UK mixed martial arts. Right now, it feels like we're having a record number of fighters that are going through the Contender Series from the UK. We've got fighters obviously fighting in record numbers on the England cards and on, the UK cards as a whole. And then also with the inclusion of, the PFL Europe and a lot of other things like Cage Warriors, it feels like the UK has really found its footing and is getting opportunities more than ever. When you talk about the UK now versus maybe when you first started covering combat sports, what would be your biggest takeaway and what makes you most excited about where UK mixed martial arts is now?
Well, there's many things. I think we could talk a whole podcast on this, truth be told. So I think there's a difference. I think participation is up. Quality of athletes that we're churning out most definitely is up. Still not sure whether the popularity of the sport has really developed as much as I would like to have seen it do. We're going to sell out. Yes, we're going to sell out these arenas that we're going. It's only like 25,000, and they're thirsty over here. We're getting one event a year and maybe two events a year in Europe at the moment, which, for me as the European guy over here, like I've got no say in it, obviously, but I'm campaigning. I'm like, please, can we have some more? Because I feel like a lot of the talent that would really love to be fighting in the UFC is now forced to go elsewhere because they would typically backfill these cards with local fighters. Anyway, that aside, let's talk really positively about the amateur scene that has developed. I was actually at the EMA, the English Mixed Martial Arts Association qualifiers for the World Championships in Uzbekistan on Sunday. The quality that I saw, particularly the main event, my goodness, like it is ridiculous. When I started in mixed martial arts, there wasn't really an amateur scene. You had something called the Combat Sports Trials, which was on a mat. You were wearing shin guards, and it was a tournament-based style of fixture. And then after that, you'd have like a semi-pro bout. And then there was a weird mix of all kinds of different rules. I then did like the MMA League. But now you've got the IMAF system, which allows for people to represent their country. There's a lot more stricter controls in place. They are doing the weight management thing a lot better. So no longer are people just shortcutting, well, yeah, putting themselves straight into professional rules fighting, which can go wrong because there's a lot of people that just want to wear the t-shirt. But if they meet a guy or a gal who is phenomenal and is on the trajectory to greatness, then they can get really hurt. So I'm really pleased to see that those elements are calming down in the sport now. In the UK, you can still put on a show with any kind of rule set if you want, which is pretty scary. Thankfully, it doesn't happen very often. So there's work to be done, and I'm glad to kind of be a part of a movement that is trying to stamp that out and make sure everyone does things properly. So yeah, there's a lot to be proud of. There's a lot to be excited for, particularly from the athlete standpoint. And we got some fighters that I used to commentate on are now coaching, and they're really good eggs. They're really, really great coaches. And now we're seeing their students come through and hitting the top echelons of the sport. And I'm super proud, to have been around long enough to see this. And I hope I'm around for a lot longer to see how far we can go.
Definitely. And one thing that stood out to me, of course, a week from now, we've got one of the most historic events in UFC history where we'll have two UFC, one interim champion, of course, in the form of Tom Aspinall, and one UFC welterweight champion, Leon Edwards. Two champions from the UK on a UFC card, on a pay-per-view main event, and if I remember correctly, co-main event.
Yeah.
Yep. And just a remarkable card and a testament to how far the UK has come in recent memory, doing so much with so little. It feels like I would, love to get your thoughts on the event, quick thoughts, and then, of course, the effect that, you look at a guy like Leon Edwards and Tom Aspinall, where they've come from. The story is, has been around for fight fans who really want to look into it. Just the story of Leon Edwards alone, you can make a movie on that. And then Tom
Yeah.
Aspinall, of course, a prolific story on his upbringing and come up. What are your thoughts on the card at stand, and also just the impact that those two young gentlemen have had on the sport in their short time as champion, but what it feels like a prolific career to get to that point?
It's a lot there. Yeah. So my job is storyteller. And everyone's got a story. Everyone's got a story. But you are right to identify Leon's story as a unique one. And there indeed should be a movie made about his come up. Let's focus on him for a second. He is a leader. He really is. I've seen him in the room in Birmingham. I've seen the respect he commands. He's all business, you know. Leon was never the guy to jump on a microphone and say X, Y, and Z. He was triggered quite a lot actually by Darren Till and his antics when that was all going on, and that sort of turned a proportion of the fans against him. But it's been incredible to see him win over all of those fans through the success that he's had, the way that he's done it. For a guy that wasn't really at home on the microphone, he's cut one of the best post-fight interviews, like promos or wrap-ups that we've ever seen in Salt Lake City, right? And that it's going to be one of the biggest moments that we all remember, like, where were you when? So, you know, hats off to him to do that. He carries himself in a very positive way. He's lived a very up and down turbulent life, and to see him come through that is quite remarkable. And I'm pleased to say I've had like lots of dressed down conversations with Leon, and yeah, much respect. I really enjoy watching him, and you know, hopefully one day I'll get to call another one of his fights now. But he's pay-per-view man, so I'm not sure when that will happen. Tom Aspinall got pretty close to him on his way up after Cage Warriors, and as he was coming through here in the UFC, just incredible relationship with his father and how they've worked together to get where they are, and the team that they've now built is phenomenal. This collective of heavyweights that are all getting together in the north of England and helping one another. Mick Parkin is definitely another UFC fighter that's benefited from that system. Modestas Bukauskas has been up there as well too. So people are traveling. The bigger boys are traveling and trying to get a shine off of Tom Aspinall, Arnold Allen, Jai Herbert, Christian Leroy Duncan, Sam Patterson, the Figlack brothers. I'm missing some. But they are all going to the Midlands. The guys that are in that welterweight, middleweight category, obviously featherweight as well. They're trying to learn from some of the greats that we've got coming out, and people are coming together. When I was growing up in the sport, there was a lot of infighting. Bama and Cage Warriors were bashing heads a lot, and it wasn't pleasant. But now we've got this situation where you know, the rising tide is lifting all ships, and they're all giving each other a little bunk up to help promote one another. And I learned today, I spoke with Oban Elliott for my own Fight Pass content. Tom Aspinall reached out to him, you know, without any kind of pre-introduction before he was on his debut, and gave him a bunch of advice, and a particular note of advice Oban took with him, and it helped him perform better in his debut. I mean, how nice is that? Like, the champ is going out of his way to just reach out to younger fighters to impart some wisdom that can possibly help, and it definitely did. And it's nice to hear that, right? Because we don't know that happens. So it's nice to hear how humble and how giving some of these men and women are. The card, brilliant showcase for UK and Ireland mixed martial arts. Of course, we got Kiefer Crosby and Shauna in there as well. Brilliant. You know, great to see them invite international competition over here. They're going to try and defend the territory. Let's see how they do.
Definitely. And another name I'd love to mention, of course, Callum Loughran from I know he trains at Team Calbon, and like you mentioned, just the array of talent in the north of England and in the Midlands, you know, all of them coming together, from whether it's Next Gen to Team Renegade to Manchester Top Team to Calbons. You know, you talk about all of those gyms and all of them coming together to help aid and abet the scene and make it what it is today. It's truly remarkable, and I cannot think of a better team effort in recent memory from a country quite like, you know, England and just the greater UK and Ireland, of course. And John, I want to thank you so much for your time, for the quick opportunity to chat, pick your brain. I want to say first and foremost, without you and the many amazing voices behind the UFC broadcast, the UFC would not be what it is. So I want to say that from a fan perspective, and also from hopefully one day a colleague perspective, just as a person who covers this sport. Thank you for all that you do. And I got two final questions for you. One, I know you and Bisping are a fan of UK garage and house music, and I know there is a little bit of a ritual that goes on, whether it's hitting the pads with Dan Hardy or whether it's listening to some great UK garage or house music. I gotta ask, what is on John Gooden's house music rotation right now? And is there maybe a never before heard story that you would love to share with the FightWave audience at home from your time with the UFC broadcast?
Okay, so it is, yes. UK Garage is my jam. You know, MC Luck and Neat. You got DJ EZ. I will always listen to something that he can spin up for sure. House music, I like vocal house. Take me anything from the 2000s, I'd do it. But I'm a big fan of Chasing Status as well. So we got some of the more upbeat stuff, and that you'll hear them on some walkouts. But for high energy workouts, etc., that's always very cool. Some broadcast stuff. I mean, there's so many things. Each individual brings a challenge in terms of like making that broadcast work, but also a level of privilege and excitement. Sometimes the guys down the line from me, I've got some of the baddest dudes on the planet that are there, and I'm, you know, they are. It's just good to hear them give their opinion on the sport, and sometimes if we can do it in a really fun way. I'm yet to sit down with Bisping and just talk about all of the other things that he does. I tell you what, let me just say one thing that I'm truly blown away by the energy that Bisping and DC have to do all the other stuff that they do. You know what it's like to churn out this stuff, this content, you know, good quality content to keep it going, you know, over an extended period of time. So hard to do. And they're also preparing for these complicated broadcasts as well. So hats off to them. I don't know how they do it. It's not like they've got big teams. I know they do get assistants, but even so, they still got to turn up when the lights are on and still do a good job across all of them. And I'm sort of blown away by it. But maybe less with Bisping, because he was the high energy guy, right? He was always high volume. Couldn't sit still, so he's getting it done. So yeah, I look up to those guys for their just all of their efforts and what they put into this sport continue to do.
Definitely. And when you talk about a man of many trades, of course, from spinning records to, you know, doing the UFC commentary to
And
everything
acting.
and acting, you know, and then you've got Daniel Cormier, of course, with the Gilroy Wrestling Team, his own YouTube channel, and then you've got, you know, the UFC broadcast. It's just remarkable that they're even able to have 50% of 50% present for those octagon.
And they're
for those
family
octagons.
men as
Yeah.
well. It's crazy, man. I
It's
don't know how they do it.
unbelievable. Yeah, man. Even just the interviews, it's crazy to do that, and on top of other stuff. But, you know, John, once again, you know, just thank you so much for the chat and for the opportunity. I always love to say with these interviews, it's not so much an interview, but it's an opportunity for me to gain perspective and hopefully down the line give perspective. So I want to thank you so much for for the opportunity and for your time. And to the fans at home watching, do be sure to check out John Gooden and his YouTube channel. I will be linking all of John Gooden's social medias in the description down below. If you would like to get more of an insight into the UFC broadcasting side and just what it is like to cover the sport at the highest level, look no further than John Gooden and his YouTube channel. I will be linking that in the description down below. It has been me, Dan, from FightWave. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the interview. Do be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and have a great day, guys.